Okay, so we're diving deep today into all this stuff you've got about recession-proofing your life. And wow, this is quite the collection.
Yeah, it looks like you've been doing your research.
I mean, we've got like the whole enchilada here, articles about like what even is a recession,
Mm-hmm.
to like super specific side hustle ideas. So it's like, are you getting ready for just a rainy day or like the whole rainy season?
What I find really interesting is how you're looking at both the big picture with the economic trends and then also these granular details like specific side hustles. You even have stuff here about the psychological side of things. It seems like you want to really cover all your bases.
Yeah, I don't want to be caught off guard.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig in and see what we can uncover.
Okay, so one thing that jumps out at me is this cheat sheet you have. It's got all the classic recession things on it,
Like what?
like the stock market going down and like the national debt going up, all that doom and gloom.
Right.
But is that really the whole picture?
That's a great question. And this training guide you have actually addresses that. It says that just because we're in a recession doesn't mean every single industry is going to suffer. In fact, some industries do really well during a recession.
Now, like what? What kind of businesses do better when everything's going down the tubes?
Well, think about it. Healthcare is always going to be necessary, right?
Yeah.
And then there's essential goods, things people need no matter what the economy is doing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Even like financial advisors, they can actually do better in a recession because everyone is freaking out and needs help.
So like they're the therapists of the money world.
Yeah.
I like it.
Exactly. What this really highlights is that recessions are more like a reshuffling of the deck rather than everything just like going away completely.
Hmm. I never thought about it like that.
It's about shifting priorities.
Okay, that's a good point. And speaking of shifting priorities,
Yeah.
this other guide you have really emphasizes the importance of having multiple streams of income.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, they even give examples like maybe you could sell ebooks online or rent out your car or even a spare bedroom. Kind of like diversify your income to make it more recession-proof.
Exactly. It's like the classic saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If your job is your only source of income and you lose your job during a recession, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle.
You're sunk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you have multiple streams of income, it's like having a safety net.
Okay. I'm seeing that theme of diversification in a lot of these materials, actually. Like even this one about investing in dividend stocks or doing crowd-funded real estate. It's like, don't just rely on your paycheck.
Right. It's about creating multiple avenues of income. You're not just relying on one source that could dry up.
Okay, I've got to say, some of these passive income ideas are pretty out there.
What have you found?
Like selling stock photos online. Who's buying those?
Wow.
And peer-to-peer lending. I mean, that just sounds risky.
Yeah. Some of them are definitely more appealing than others, I'll give you that. But I think what's important is that these sources are encouraging us to think outside the box, to be creative and look for opportunities where other people might not be looking.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like the old saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Exactly. One person's recession is another person's opportunity.
Okay, now this cheat sheet gets into what not to do in a recession. And some of these seem pretty obvious, like they say don't go out and get an adjustable rate mortgage when interest rates are all over the place.
Right.
But then there's one that really hit home for me, which is don't assume that your job is invincible.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Especially these days.
Right. Like nobody's job is truly safe, is it?
No job is 100% recession-proof, but certain roles and industries are definitely more vulnerable than others.
And that's where that whole having multiple income streams thing comes in handy again.
Exactly. It gives you options. It's like having a backup plan or even multiple backup plans.
Okay, this guide seems to be on the same page because it talks about building up what it calls survival skills.
Like what kind of skills are we talking about here?
Well, it seems to be a pretty broad range. They talk about understanding basic economics like supply and demand, how to budget your money effectively, and even how to market yourself in a tight job market.
Those are all really valuable skills to have regardless of the economy.
Right. Like those could come in handy at any time.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and taking control of your own financial well-being. Knowledge is power, especially in times of uncertainty.
Absolutely. I love how this guide gets into the nitty-gritty of some of these skills too.
What do you mean?
Like for investing, they recommend dollar cost averaging, which basically means investing consistently over time instead of trying to time the market.
Smart.
And then for everyday expenses, they talk about things like negotiating with your service providers to try to get lower rates, or even just being more mindful of your spending habits in general.
It's about being more intentional with your money.
Yeah, and I think what's smart about that is they're acknowledging that we don't have control over everything. Like,
Mm.
we can't control the stock market or whether we lose our job or not.
Right.
But we can control how we respond to those things.
Mhm.
We can control our spending and our saving and our investing.
And having that financial cushion in place with an emergency fund can really make a difference if and when something unexpected happens. It gives you options.
This whole supply and demand thing keeps coming up.
Mm.
And it's like they're saying, don't just assume that everyone's cutting back on everything during a recession.
Because they're not.
Right. There's
Yeah.
still goods and services that people need even more of during a recession.
Exactly. It's about identifying those needs and finding a way to meet them.
So it's like, instead of just hunkering down and waiting for the storm to pass,
Mm-hmm.
you should be looking for ways to adapt and thrive in the new environment.
It's about being proactive and finding opportunity where others might only see doom and gloom.
Okay, I got to ask about this whole section on building an online business.
Yeah.
Is that really feasible? Like, to launch a whole business when the economy's tanking?
You'd be surprised. Actually, starting a business during a recession can be a really smart move.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it. Traditional businesses are often pulling back and cutting costs during a recession, right?
Yeah.
Which can create an opening for new businesses with fresh ideas and lower overhead costs to come in and disrupt the market.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
And the fact that this guide is specifically talking about building an online business is even more relevant today with so much commerce happening online.
That's a good point. The internet doesn't just shut down during a recession.
Exactly. If anything, people might be even more reliant on online businesses during tough times because they're often more affordable and convenient.
So it's like, instead of thinking of a recession as a time to just batten down the hatches and wait it out, it could actually be a time for incredible innovation and growth.
Exactly. Sometimes the greatest opportunities emerge during times of great upheaval.
It's like that whole saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. When times get tough, the tough get creative.
This training guide actually goes even deeper into those industry-specific impacts. And it's not just the obvious stuff like healthcare either.
Oh, really? Like
Yeah.
what?
They talk about how, like, online marketing agencies can actually do well in a recession
Interesting.
because businesses need to adapt and find new ways to reach customers when the economy's down. And then there's like home improvement contractors, because people might be putting off buying a new house, but they still got to fix that leaky roof, right?
That's a great point. It's like certain needs become even more important during a recession.
Exactly. It's not just about everything being gloom and doom.
Right. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, it highlights how recession-proofing isn't just about like hunkering down and waiting it out.
It's more like being a savvy surfer. You got to ride those waves of change.
Yes, exactly. And that means spotting where the new opportunities are emerging.
Speaking of spotting opportunities, this cheat sheet has a whole section on what not to do in a recession. Like, one thing they say is, don't get an adjustable rate mortgage when interest rates are all over the place.
Oh, yeah, that's just asking for trouble.
Right. Like, who knows what your payments are going to be from one month to the next?
Yeah, you don't want to be at the mercy of the market like that, especially during a recession.
And then there's this other one that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume your job is invincible.
Oof. Yeah, that's a hard truth for a lot of people.
Because we all like to think that our job is safe and secure. But the reality is...
The reality is that no job is truly recession-proof.
Exactly.
But it's important to remember that certain roles and industries are inherently more susceptible to downturns than others.
And that's where having those multiple income streams can be a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Because if one stream dries up, you've got others to fall back on. It's all about spreading that risk.
This guide kind of takes that idea of risk management even further.
How so?
Because they talk about building up your survival skills.
Okay, now that sounds intense. What kind of survival skills are we talking about here?
Well, they don't get into, like, building a bunker in your backyard or anything.
Okay, good, because I don't have the space.
But they do talk about things like understanding how the economy works, like basic economics,
Okay.
how to create a budget and stick to it,
Important?
and even like how to negotiate a better salary or freelance rates.
Those are really valuable skills to have regardless of whether there's a recession or not.
Exactly. Like, those are just good life skills in general.
It's about being proactive and taking control of your own financial well-being. Because knowledge is power, especially when everything feels uncertain.
I love how this guide gets into the nitty-gritty of some of these skills too.
What do you mean?
Like with investing, they talk about this thing called dollar cost averaging,
Right.
which I've heard of, but I'm like, what does that even mean?
It can sound intimidating, but it's actually pretty simple.
So basically, instead of trying to time the market and buy low and sell high, which is like impossible to do consistently,
Pretty much, yeah.
you invest a little bit of money at regular intervals, no matter what the market is doing.
Exactly. So you're not as affected by short-term fluctuations in the market.
And then for everyday expenses, they have all these tips on like how to negotiate with your service providers to try and get a lower rate on your internet bill or your phone bill.
Which everyone wants to do, right?
Right. Or even just being more mindful of your spending habits in general, like making your own coffee at home instead of buying it every day.
It's amazing how much those small changes can add up over time.
And I think what's smart about that is they're acknowledging that we can't control everything.
Of course not.
Like we can't control the stock market or whether or not we get laid off,
Right.
but we can control how we respond to those things.
Exactly. And we can control our own spending and saving and investing habits.
And having that emergency fund in place can really make a difference if and when something unexpected happens.
Absolutely. It gives you options. It gives you breathing room.
It's like that financial cushion that you can fall back on. So
Yeah.
you're not completely freaking out if you lose your job or the market tanks.
Yeah.
You know, we keep coming back to this whole supply and demand thing.
It's a fundamental economic principle.
It is. And it's like these sources are saying, don't just assume that everyone's cutting back on everything during a recession.
He's saying not.
Right.
People still have needs.
They still need to eat and have a roof over their heads and take care of their families.
Exactly.
So it's like, instead of just hunkering down and waiting for the storm to pass, you should be looking for ways to adapt and thrive in the new environment.
It's about being proactive and finding opportunity where others might only see doom and gloom.
So it's like, instead of thinking, oh no, the sky is falling,
Right?
you should be thinking, okay, how can I make the best of this situation?
Exactly. Because a recession doesn't have to be all bad.
It's like that old saying, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Exactly. Or in this case, maybe start a lemonade stand.
I have to admit, I'm still wrapping my head around this whole starting a business during a recession thing. It just seems kind of counterintuitive.
I get it. It seems like everyone's freaking out about the economy and you're thinking about starting a business. But these sources actually make some really compelling arguments.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, recessions often force businesses to get leaner and meaner.
Yeah.
They have to find ways to do more with less,
Right.
which can lead to some really innovative solutions. And then there's the fact that during a recession, you often have less competition.
Because everyone else is too scared to start a business.
Exactly. And things like rent and labor costs can be lower too. So it's actually a really good time to be opportunistic and try something new.
I guess it's like that old saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
Exactly. You got to be willing to zig when everyone else is zagging. Speaking of zigging and zagging, this guide seems to place a lot of emphasis on understanding the psychology of a recession. Not just the financial aspects, but like the mental game of it all.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Like, if you're not careful, you can totally let your emotions get the best of you and make some really bad decisions.
Absolutely. Remember earlier when we were talking about behavioral economics? Well, this is where that really comes into play. Because when you're in the throes of a recession and everyone's panicking, it's easy to make irrational decisions based on fear and uncertainty.
Like Tannic selling all your stock.
Exactly. Or going into debt because you're convinced the world is ending.
Or buying a whole bunch of gold and burying it in your backyard.
Well, maybe not that, but you get the idea.
I do. So what's the key takeaway here? How can we avoid falling into those psychological traps?
This guide really stresses the importance of staying informed and not letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Like they say, knowledge is power. The more you understand about how recessions work and the potential pitfalls to avoid, the better equipped you'll be to make rational decisions.
So it's like forewarned is forearmed.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this. Millions of people have gone through recessions before and come out the other side. So take a deep breath.
Don't panic.
Exactly. And focus on what you can control. Your spending, your saving, your investing, your mindset. Those are the things that will ultimately determine your success.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think about today. From the nitty-gritty of budgeting to the high-level stuff like economic trends and even the psychology of it all.
It's all connected.
It really is. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap up this deep dive?
You've really absorbed a ton of information about how to not just survive, but potentially even thrive during a recession. From practical tips on managing your finances to spotting those unique opportunities that emerge during times of change.
Like starting a lemonade stand.
Exactly. But as you move forward, I want you to remember one crucial thing. You are not just a passive bystander in this. You have the power to shape your own financial destiny. So be proactive, stay informed, and don't be afraid to think differently. And who knows, maybe this recession will be your chance to really shine.
I love that. It's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain.
Now you're getting it.